Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah hafokba la'asok b'divrei Torah yidadai-dai-dai-dai-dai 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 yidadai-dai-dai-dai. So it's good to be with you all. We are streaming on Facebook. So I see there's at least one person who's joining us that way right now. Welcome to all of you. And we're going to be diving into this first Torah portion in the book of Leviticus, which is kind of exciting always to start a new book. And for everyone who had a chance to look at the book or look at the sheet even before, you know that we're going to be focusing today, here we go, on generosity and this very first text from the Torah. So you'll notice I started with the very first few verses that come in Leviticus, and that's exactly the verses that were mentioned within our Torah commentary as well. But I just want to point out one really little thing, which is this letter right here. If you look at the first word in the Torah portion, there is one letter in the Torah that is written smaller than all the rest. And that itself can lead to multiple different Torah studies, right? And this word, Vayikra, means calling. And so that Aleph, this Torah portion, very easily could have been another one on Anavah, on humility. The Aleph being smaller as a sign of humility, as being able to step back even in being called. And that itself is actually quite fascinating. Okay, but I digress a little bit. Is this big enough for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I want us to do is just start by reading these verses right here. Would anyone like to take that on? And this right here, you could just say God or Adonai.
No, I think Stephen called about 11.
Well, I'll do it.
Thank you, Jessica.
Adonai called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when any of you presents an offering of cattle to Adonai, you shall choose your offering from the herd or from the flock. If your offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you shall make your offering a male without blemish. You shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting for acceptance in your behalf before Adonai. You shall lay a hand upon the head of the burnt offering, that it may be acceptable in your behalf in expiation for you."
Thank you so much. So who is excited to learn a lot about animal sacrifices here?
Oh, me. No, just kidding.
Exactly, right? I mean, I feel like whenever we get to this portion and we're just kind of like struck by animal sacrifice after animal sacrifice, and it goes into some pretty vivid detail, right? It's like, why are we studying this? What does this have to teach us today? We have no desire to do animal sacrifices anymore. I know I don't, right? Our form of worship definitely speaks to me a lot more than this, but yet we study it every single year. We look at it every single year and go through the details. And so I think this Torah portion and this commentary that we're blessed to be able to read is trying to figure out, well, where are the messages in that do speak to us, even if the the simple understanding of the text itself might not necessarily be our thing, right? And so today we're talking about generosity. And what does it mean to be generous? And I think that is something that very much is relatable. And it's a timely attribute, right? So I want us just to look at David Jaffe's This is from the beginning of his commentary on this portion. And he says, indeed, the Hebrew word for sacrifice is korban, from the root kuf resh vet, which is karov, meaning to draw close. The entire sacrificial system is an exercise in drawing close and being in relationship with God, and by extension with oneself and others. Embedded in the details of the sacrificial system are clues to having successful relationships. The midah of generosity, nedivut, is central to the process. So any thoughts or reflections or questions about any of this before we dive in more? Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
This sounds like a silly question. So we are drawing close. Are we drawing close to each other in the act of the sacrifice because we do it, I think, as a community? Maybe I'm wrong. Or is it we draw close to God, or both?
I think it's a beautiful question. I mean, the way in which Rabbi David Jaffe is writing about it, saying it's an exercise in drawing close and being in relationship with God, and by extension with oneself and others. But perhaps we feel that differently. Perhaps there's, I mean, I think it's a very nuanced question in a lot of ways. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, Elaine, are you trying to say something and you're muted? Maybe not. Maybe I made that up. Yeah, Marla, go ahead.
What I'm reminded of is years ago when our temple made the decision to change the wording of dues to commitment. And we learned that vocabulary was truly an example of what we wanted to become at our place of worship, that connection, that commitment versus the, for lack of a better word, the obligation. And it's a nuance kind of a thing. And it was an adjustment for some people who wanted to talk about dues and membership versus commitment and what that meant. It was a great learning opportunity. And that's what this particular portion makes me think of.
Because of the focus on the relationships.
The relational, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
Rabbi, I think I asked this question before, but I forgot your response. I've heard it both ways. When sacrificed, the animal was any part of the animal eaten by the people.
Yeah, so it depends on the sacrifice, and it's a nuanced answer, right? As so many things are in the Torah. Rabbis can't keep things simple; it always has to be nuanced. But there are some sacrifices, and indeed, David Jaffe, I believe, at the beginning does talk about this a little bit. How the first sacrifices that are mentioned in this portion are ones that are eaten by, especially the vulnerable people in the community, the priests who don't have land, they have to rely entirely upon others in order to be able to get food. But there are some later sacrifices that are offered up in totality up to God. The majority of them, however, are eaten by people within the community.
Yeah, another comment I'd like to make, the animal sacrifice, it sure is in stark contrast to human sacrifice of other preceding faiths, or maybe even existing faiths at the same time.
I didn't get all of that. I'm sorry, Irv. Was there a question that you were trying to?
It's in stark contrast to where some faiths or cultures had human sacrifice. And,
yes. Absolutely. In fact, the story of Abraham, if you remember what we call the Akedah, the story where Abraham brings Isaac up to the altar and nearly sacrifices him, that is a very purposeful text in there in which to demonstrate we do not sacrifice human beings. We sacrifice animals, but not people, unlike some of the surrounding nations, such as the ones who worshipped Molech, for example, right outside of the old city. Yeah, Jessica, go ahead.
Why does it have to be an unblemished male?
Such a good question.
There's symbolism in that, or?
Well, there's a practical answer to that. It's the same reason you don't shoot does when you're hunting deer. It's procreation aspect of it. You can take a male, but you're not stopping the species. If you take everybody takes a doe, then you're stopping the progression of the species.
But you need both.
Yes, you do, but
Last I looked.
one male can take care of a lot of does, and so you take the does away, you'll have less calves.
Yeah, and in terms of the unblemished, the idea there was you offer up your best. And there's a lot to be said and tons of debate and commentary and, today about, the appropriateness of that perhaps, but that's where I was coming from at this time. Great questions. So why don't we dive into the next piece of this, where we have this overarching kind of question, is it enough to give? Right, our sacrifice is about giving something that's ours up either to God in totality or to members of the community or a combination thereof. And we're given lots of different commandments throughout the Torah that talk about the importance of giving. Obviously, I'm not including all of them here. We'd be here for weeks. But in Deuteronomy, for example, it says, if, however, there is a needy person among you, one of your kin and any of your settlements in the land that your God Adonai is giving you, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kin. Rather, you must open your hand and lend whatever is sufficient to meet the need. So this real command, this obligation to stand up and to do something. Similarly, we have in the Talmud, this is from Talmud Bavli, if you remember, that comes around fourth century-ish. It says, and Rabbi Yitzchak says, anyone who gives a peruta, some sort of a donation, to a poor person receives 6 blessings. And whoever consoles him with words of comfort and encouragement receives 11 blessings. So what is our text trying to get across with this?
That it's the intent of the gift that you're feeling for that person, your relationship makes that gift special. Not that one is better than the other, but that one without the other is not valuable. And the most valuable piece is the intent, is the relationship, I think.
Beautiful. Did everyone hear that?
No, not quite.
I know it's hard sometimes with all this technology.
Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, if you could repeat it. that'd be
Well,
great.
that one isn't better than the other, but the intent is important. So the gift is important as well, but with some time we give to get something back. So that's not the greatest intent. But if we give from our hearts for that person's betterment, then I think our gift is increased. The value of our gift is increased.
Beautiful. Yeah, Jessica, and then Marley, you wanted to say something as well, right?
So you said it.
Oh, okay, great. Go ahead, Jessica.
Is peruta, is that a like food or money or some, what is that?
I believe it's a monetary amount. I would have to look that up. I'm not positive of that, but I think it's some sort of a, donation.
Okay.
So
Any other thoughts on this?
I think it's also that to console a person means you spend time with them, often touching them, encouraging them. That's been alluded to here also, that you are giving of yourself, that you are, it's like talking with your family or a very close friend, as opposed to just kind of providing what is needed, and the need itself is a blessing, but the identity and the time taken to console someone, I think, is what makes it especially valuable.
Beautiful. Yeah, Frank.
I think the it's just trying to really pound home that it's service to others, right? It's not, I don't want to go out, try to say this right way. I don't want just for myself to have, my blessings will only come when I share myself with others and take that time. And also, I think part of that monetary, it also, if you can't contribute monetary to the poor, then the next thing better than that is to stand up for them, right? To take the time to do the things to stand up for others and not just talk about it. So,
Beautiful. Yeah, so I mean, if we go back to this question here, right? Is it enough to give or to give out of obligation, like in our Torah, like what they're teaching us in Deuteronomy? Is that enough? What do you think? I'm seeing nods in different directions. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm trying to think of circumstances where it's the act more than the relationship. So I'm thinking, currently, some of us are choosing to send money to help Ukrainians, but we aren't there with our relationship. And I'm saying to myself, maybe that's okay, because right now they need a chunk of money to do what they have to do to survive. So I want to say, to answer the question, sometimes, yes, it is enough. And then other times it's much more powerful if you can share words of comfort and encouragement. Not for the blessings that you receive or that even the other person. It's like visiting the sick versus sending a card. If you can visit, do it. But if you can't, it's still good that you sent the card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I think what we're seeing in these texts, right, is that yes, giving is enough. But if we can give with relationships, how much better still, right? You get 6 blessings if you give. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
By all means, do it. But you get 11 blessings if you add this piece of dignity to it. If you look at someone and see them and respond to them. And that's the other piece. It's really important that you brought up what you did, Marla, because I just got off the phone a little while ago from a phenomenal person in our community asking, what can we do about what's going on in Ukraine? I know I can give money. I know that's helpful, but I want to do something. And I think part of the relationship is being able to say, okay, how do I listen to what's really needed? Because there are times, and this person didn't put this forth in any way, but there are times where a crisis is going on and someone says, okay, I got to do something. I'm going to get boxes of hundreds of teddy bears. And that actually isn't helpful for the people who are getting it, right? And so part of being in relationship here, I think, is listening and figuring out what actually will be helpful. And among the many things that will be helpful, being able to respond to that. There's kind of a dignity and respect for, I'm doing this because I want to help. There always is a component. I feel good from helping. I want to do something. That's great. It's wonderful that we have that as human beings. We're called to do that. That's a blessing. But how can I help in a way that is going to be the best for you too? Yeah, Jessica, go ahead.
Well, I'm struck by the number of blessings, 6 blessings and 11. Okay, 6, but why 11? Why not 12? So when you console someone and you give of your time and energy, isn't that worth twice as much as a peruta? It's just, they seem like strange numbers, 6 and 11.
Yeah,
Doesn't
it
even add
comes
up to,
from,
sorry. No, I was just going to say it doesn't even add up to 18.
That is true. It comes from specific texts that's what the rabbis do, is they take different texts and they kind of apply it in places that you might not have gotten to yourself. And they list out the verses and what the blessings are based on biblical scripture. I didn't bring all that in here because I thought it would take us in different directions. But if you look up, even on Sefaria, if you type in Bava Batra 9b 8, you will see that entire textual reference, and I encourage you to do that to try to understand that a little bit more. Another text that I want to just bring in here, we're going back to the first verses that we read at the beginning because of a commentary that'll be on one specific word. You can see I bolded one word, and that word means it. So it's an unusual word to have bolded in a sentence. But it says, if your offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you shall make your offering male without blemish. You shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting for acceptance in your behalf before Adonai. And why is that word so important? Well, Rashi offers a commentary on that one word. And essentially what he's saying is every single word in the Torah is important, right? Like Rashi, we believe, and we very well might not agree with this, but that the Torah is a divine text. Then there's nothing that's written in the text that is superfluous. Here, it already said, if your offering is a burnt offering from the herd, we know about this offering already. So what is the it that is being brought? We already know about the offering. We don't have to mention it again. There must be something else. That's where Rashi is coming from, and that's what he's trying to kind of posit here. So he said, this apparently superfluous word, oto, teaches that they, the person who's making this donation, must put pressure upon him. Oh no, the Beit Din, that's what it is, the Beit Din, the group of rabbis, the group of leaders who are there must put pressure upon him to bring the sacrifice if he is remiss in bringing the sacrifice that he had promised. One might think that this means they shall force him against his will. Scripture, however, states he must bring it. And this word, ratzon, means want. Okay, so it shall be favorably accepted for him. So not only should he bring it, but what this text is saying, he has to want to bring it, so that it will be favorably accepted. Because if he's not doing it wholeheartedly, then it doesn't actually fully count. Okay, so how is it possible? They press him until he says, I wish to do it. They can't force him into doing it. He said, I want to do it. Then he went back on that promise. Now they're coming in and saying, hey, I'm reminding you, you wanted to do it. You want to do it. You want to do it. You want to do it. And they keep pushing him until he says, all right, I want to do it. And he does it. Kind of an interesting thing going on there, huh?
Yes.
So there's kind of an interplay between obligation and desire to help. I see some furrowed brows. Any questions or thoughts any of you are having online? Well, you're welcome to jump in at any time you will. I wonder if this commentary right here, going back to David Jaffe, might help. So what he says is, what happened here? A person decided to draw close to God through a sacrifice, perhaps as a sign of gratitude. They generously committed to offer a cow, sheep, or another animal. However, some time passed and they did not fulfill their pledge. At this point, their free will act has obligated them to follow through, just like a pledge to charity. The Jewish court has the license to compel them to fulfill their pledge. Now we are in the realm of obligation. Still, this offering must have the quality of ratzon, of desire or favor, which is associated with a desiring to give out of free will. For the gift to be favorable to God, its receiver, it needs to be given out of a desire to give, not out of compulsion. The Beit Din, this rabbinic court, is charged with a difficult task of working with the giver until they realize that they actually desire to give.
Powerful.
Pretty interesting stuff going on here. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know I'm very uncomfortable with the whole thing. Because you're talking about obligation versus desire. And I never liked, I'm a generous person, but I never like to be pressured. I don't think anybody does. And I don't know if I'm understanding this correctly. They put pressure upon him until they, actually want to do it. But I don't know, that feels uncomfortable,
It is uncomfortable. There's no doubt about that. There's a piece of this that's uncomfortable.
But you're forgetting that this person has already made a commitment to do it.
Yeah.
He's reneging on a commitment.
Right.
And the
Right,
commit,
and then,
and-
sorry.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I can't see all the screens. It's hard to do in person and online. Frank first, then Shelley, and then Catherine. Were you trying to say something as well?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll be quick. I think this goes back to what the it is in what we were just talking about. And I think the offering is, do you know that that's the best that you have that you're offering? Like that's the it. Like, do you know, are you offering up something that's really not your best? Or are you offering what you know is everything in your best? That's what I think the it is. So I'll get off.
Beautiful. Pushing someone. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think the desire part, I feel really comfortable with that because there's a lot of times when I don't desire to give, and but I feel compelled by my own sense of rightness and also by other people's sense of rightness. But I think the fact that somebody wants me to have that desire, to have the enjoyment as well of giving. So I see it as, I may not desire to be good, let's say, or to give, but I want that desire to give. And I think that that's probably the greatest gift that God can give us, in a sense. And if a community can give that to you, I think that's pretty nice, because there's lots of times when I don't have that desire, but it would be nice to have it with the gift.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at it, as being kind of cool in that way. So
Very cool. Yeah. Rabbi Catherine.
I'm thinking of it from the point of view of when you say you're going to give a gift to God. This isn't a gift to just anyone. So I'm wondering, I'm thinking if you make a pledge to give something to God, that affects you personally, because then you have this little dark spot inside of you that says, that was God that I was going to do this for, and I haven't done it. And I'm wondering if the rabbis are also looking at Jews as a community of people, that we are the children of God and all of that. And I'm sensing that there is a kind of something flowing through it, that is, if we start getting into saying, oh yeah, in this case, this is something that I'm going to give to God, and I'm just not going to do it, that becomes we put ourselves in a very difficult place then. At the time, it may seem like nothing. I can see where it would say, let's say that you said you were going to give an animal from your herd, but the entire herd drowned in a flash flood or something. I can see where on that point you might renege or say, God, I'll do this later. But this is not just something you say you're going to do for anyone. And to me, that is the big piece of it, that there is the desire, there is the being favored, but there is also the recognition that we are talking about God here. We're not talking about a person.
Yeah, so it's something that's bigger. And there are like accommodations that are made if something happens, right?
Yeah,
like there
right.
are ways around some of those details. But what's really kind of interesting about this, and just building upon what you said and what Shelley said just a second ago, right, is, and even, sorry, what you were talking about, how this is uncomfortable, right? Like it is absolutely uncomfortable. because here was a promise, it wasn't done, and so it's pushing someone. But here's the thing that I've kind of like learned is that we grow from our places of discomfort. And
That's
what
true.
this is it's an opportunity
Mhm.
to push ourselves and to push one another to grow. If we remember back to the story of Abraham, do you recall how when Abraham is talking to God and God says, I'm going to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham said, God forbid you do that, right? And there's this chutzpah in that. But it was holding God in a place of discomfort in hopes that God would grow into a more compassionate God. And like, if that can be the case for God, then so too can it be for us. Musar is always teaching us that we all have a soul curriculum. And when we take one step forward in the right direction, we slowly actually move the needle to be a little bit more balanced, more of the self that we wish to be, that we are at our core, but sometimes we're led astray from, or, we make a choice and we don't realize, oh, it's just one little thing, let it go. And then slowly we find ourselves in a place that isn't really where we want to be. And so this is a community coming together and saying, remember who you wanted to be and who you made a commitment to be. We're going to help you get back there.
This in many ways, to me, is like doing a mitzvah. There's an obligation, but there's much more than an obligation. There's something that you receive from it. It's something that brings you closer to God, brings you closer to your neighbors, everything. So it's very, very similar to doing a mitzvah. Every time you do a mitzvah, it should make you feel good. It should be right. It's a connection.
Beautiful. Yeah. Being able to have that piece.
Yes.
Exactly. Any other thoughts or comments? Because I can't see everyone, but I don't want to miss anyone. Okay, so why don't we look at this piece? I mean, this other section that I kind of put here. What holds us back from being generous? What are the things that stop us from following through after we make a commitment, right? Or just being generous in other ways. And so Rabbi David Jaffe offers this piece saying, strong relationships cannot rely only on free will desire to give and connect. Such relationships, while feeling good in the moment, are undependable. I want to know that good friends feel committed to me and that they do not base their involvement in the relationship only on how they feel at the moment. On the other hand, relationships must be more than just obligations. Think of relationships you are in that feel like obligations. You do what is necessary, make the phone calls, show up for certain events, but an important life force is missing from those relationships. Do you want to be treated as an obligation? How does that feel? Ideally, a good relationship is built on both. A sense of obligation that binds you to the other person and the free will to want to be in relationship and to get closer with each interaction. So what might hold us back from that ratzon, that desire? Yeah.
So I think for me, what used to hold me back was ignorance. I didn't know to give. I remember being a kid and watching, do you all remember watching televisions, those Jerry Lewis muscular dystrophy, 26-hour, things on TV. So I remember that kind of giving, and of course, being young and not understanding it totally. When I began my Jewish journey here at Temple, I didn't understand the importance of the listing in the tzedakah page of the bulletin. Why are people's names there who have given? And I saw they gave in memory of, or in honor of, or in celebration of. And so I had to learn, and I have learned, that one of the ways to give is to look at that information and understand how important it is. Before I thought, if one gives, one does it discreetly. And yet now I understand better. Had I not seen the names of people I was being introduced to and learning about, and I valued their friendship and understanding of who they were, I would not have learned to be as giving as I have come to be and I want to get better at. So that's the answer to me for the question. I didn't know. I knew to give a birthday present in that framework, but I didn't understand.
Just the importance, the centrality of it.
Yes, yeah. And this is what it means to me.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for bringing that in. And I want to also, as we're going through all of this, remind everyone that like giving and giving tzedakah is really, really important. And again, and we'll see this in other texts, it's not even a matter of the amount, it's just the act of actually giving. But it's not just financial giving, it's any type of giving. Giving of ourselves, giving of our times, giving of our compassion, giving of our generosity, giving of our, our I'm trying to remember the words in English. I can only remember them in Hebrew. That's a weird thing for me. But being able to give people the benefit of the doubt, that is a form of generosity. So let's look through a couple more of these, and then we can process more of it together as well. Alan Marinis and his Everyday Holiness, which if you haven't read it, I totally encourage you to do so. I've read it 3 times now, and it is a book I will constantly go back to because there's so much wisdom and beauty in it. He writes, the Musar text, The Duties of the Heart, offers a vivid description of how the narcissistic and selfish Yetzer Hara makes every effort to discourage a people from giving generously. So let me back up to explain exactly what that is, right? For anyone who might not know. The Yetzer Hara is often translated as the evil inclination. It's that part of ourselves that we need. We absolutely need as human beings because it gives us drive. It gives us our ability to do our own best work. But it can also make us very self-focused. So what it's saying is that sometimes the Yetzer Hara is pulling us in such a way that it discourages us from being a person who gives generously. This donation would put you in grave financial danger, it might say. Or suddenly you will see a vision of yourself living in abject poverty. Or that voice that would tell you any donation is simply beyond your means. Or that the people you might give to don't deserve it. Or you gave yesterday, or you need it more than they do, or. The Yetzer Hara is very clever. It will only spout words and images that have the potential to inhibit your own heart. Why? Ultimately, not to prevent you from giving, but to challenge you to grow beyond the level of generosity where you are today. In this way, the Yetzer Hara can be a force for the good. Really interesting, right?
Very.
Can I make a comment? Or-
Yeah, please, sir.
Yeah, I had the responsibility in the organization I was when I was working for the government, this annual combined federal campaign, which is a whole laundry list of local and national charities that an employee can check off withholding the sum of money from their paycheck. My job to manage that. And the traditional way was just to put something in their mailbox, like many things we get in our mailbox. But there's a big difference when I would have them just come up and see me, and I wouldn't put pressure on them, but I would just see them and talk to them and tell them what's happening with this, and you can pick a local place that you like, and your money go directly for that. There's no overhead and all that. And the contributions went almost tripled the first year I did that, because all I did was ask. I asked in a nice way. I didn't say it's your responsibility, you must do. So I think people have to be asked also. And that's what your commitment is when you're making it. Somebody has asked you to make a commitment. And thereby you would not pass it by, you would look at it and make a commitment. And hopefully follow through.
Yeah, and Irv, that's beautiful. It brings me back to what Marla said at the very beginning, right? It's all about relationship and asking. There is a building of relationship. It goes back to that Hebrew word, karov, It's about creating closeness.
Well, it's the same thing we do in building campaigns. I mean, within our own temples, we have people go out and visit them in their home or place of business and say, and you make the presentation, we're doing this and this is what we're trying to raise and how can you help? And it's face to face. You don't just mail them a letter and say, we expect you to send X number of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, please.
Where it talks about the narcissism, and I love that because let me stand up for my own rights or whatever. I will, but when I'm standing up for somebody else's rights, right? Like almost like the whole Black Lives Matters thing. I mean, it's other people standing up and saying these people matter, and that law enforcement is, I'm not gonna get into that, but it's people that were putting themselves on the front line for that were white and Jewish, and all these other people were standing up for others because, again, I'm a white male. I can drive wherever I want with them, but I know others can't. And by standing up for that, that's getting that narcissism out of the way of the charity work, I think. It's just sound like to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big piece I didn't include in here. That Alan Marinas in his book, he actually spends a decent chunk of the chapter on generosity, talking about how sometimes people are out of balance in the other direction. They're so generous, and we can see evidence of that, perhaps in ourselves, perhaps all around us, that people can be so generous that it's actually to their own detriment. And again, this doesn't have to be financial. This can be in so many different ways, right? If we give all of ourselves and we don't replenish what we need, we can't actually even give anymore. We're not our best. So he talks about how, all of us have different balancing acts here, and we can go too far to one end, we can go too far to the other end. But the goal is to be able to, yes, take care of ourselves, but also not to use that as an excuse to take care of others, to try to figure out where is the right balance there.
Kind of a fluid concept.
Yeah.
So it really isn't a cut and dry kind of thing. It has to do with where we're at a certain time too, because we can be both. We can be too overgiving and then very stingy as a response to that. We're burnt out, we're hurt by the person that we're giving to because they're not giving back. And so, yeah.
Right. And that goes into exactly that. What is the reason that we're not following through? Right. Are we just so burnt out that we need a reminder of why we're doing this in the first place? Is it that we have been hurt so much that we actually can't give right now? And there's also a whole line of thought there too, because sometimes that is the case. Sometimes asking something from someone at a moment that they are hurting isn't the right answer. The beeping has to back off, right? It's not right. Or is there something else entirely?
Yeah.
I'm bringing in this verse here, which happens to be one of my favorite verses in the Torah. V'asuli migdash v'shachanti b'tocham, and let them make me a sanctuary that I might dwell among them. This, of course, is God speaking as the Israelites are creating or preparing to create the sanctuary. And the wording here is so incredibly important. This idea that God may dwell among them, not in the sanctuary. Don't build a sanctuary so I may dwell in it. Build a sanctuary so I might dwell among you. This coming close, this relationship that's going on here. And Rabbi Susan Leader spoke to this a little bit in a beautiful Devar Torah she wrote a few years ago, saying there is a place deep inside of us where fear cannot set up headquarters. That place is an open heart. It is where, in the words of Ed Bacon, the beloved dwells. The beloved is our core of sacredness. The beloved is your imbued dignity. It is seeing the divine in yourself and in others. Your beloved is the ineffable force that compels us to connect, to care about life and the world. When we connect with this deep place inside of us, the walls of fear begin to crumble. The more frequently we access this by cultivating the habit of generosity, we transform. That's why the book of Exodus says, make me a sanctuary and I will dwell in you. It means you create a space where the beloved can be found in your life.
Beautiful.
Is. So any other thoughts or questions on this before we go to this last section? Yeah, Jessica, please jump in.
Why did we have to build a sanctuary if God wasn't going to dwell in it? God was going to dwell among us.
Great question. Anyone have a thought on that?
So I think maybe it made us physicalize our relationship with God, whether or not we think of God as a person walking around, but it's that developing the desire to reach out, to do good. And again, we are really new at being Jews at this point, really, really new. It's like when you do something, you invest. And I think it also makes a point that God is not just in this tent, in this sanctuary or any sanctuary, but that God can be and is anywhere and everywhere. So if you had to make a line, there was a line out the door that goes down, to the ocean to meet with God, is different than that there be something that symbolizes God's presence, but that God can be anywhere and everywhere.
As long as people work together, making sacrifices of their time, of their abilities, of their physical things that they donated, right? Like this was a community that through generosity, through giving of themselves, came together. That's what that sanctuary is about.
Right.
Devotion and commitment, right?
Right, to God and to one another.
And I like, Catherine, I like the word investment. Because with investment, you're actually expecting a return on your investment. If it's pure giving, you're not looking for anything back. But in this case, you're investing something, expecting a connection, a relationship, a community, and all the benefits that flow from that. May not be monetary, of course, but that's I like that word. Thank you.
Usually out of context.
Beautiful. So I'm noticing we don't have a whole lot of time. So I'm going to go through just a couple of things in this last section so I could take it down and we could just see each other. Another piece from Alan Marinas. He writes, the very act of giving itself ultimately makes us more charitable, merciful, and loving. Love flows in the direction of giving, was Rabbi Dressler's teaching. This may also be what the Talmud means to convey when it teaches, if you want to bond yourself to loving your friend, give to him for his benefit. Rabbi Dressler saw the impact that our deeds have on our soul traits. We don't have to wait until our hearts are fully open and infused with natural generosity before we begin to give. To the contrary, acts of generosity awaken love and foster the soul trait of generosity. So it's not rationalization before action. It's action leads to kind of a deeper sense of self.
This paragraph was the central point.
Orot Sadikim also wrote, a person who gives 1,000 gold pieces to a worthy person is not as generous as one who gives 1,000 gold pieces on 1,000 different occasions, each in its proper place. For if one gives 1,000 pieces at a time, it is because he was suddenly seized with a great impulse to give that afterward departed him. So it's saying it's not so much how much you give, it's the consistency of giving, of thinking about others, of responding to people. You don't have to be rich in order to be able to be generous. There's lots of different ways to do that. Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe similarly writes, it is a wonder If a person thinks great thoughts about generosity and has many profound new concepts about it, this thinking will not enable him to acquire the attribute of generosity. But if he gives 1 coin to 1,000 poor people, through this act, he will surely acquire generosity. It's not intellectual. It's work from the soul. Yes, this was the last thing, and I just want to bring this in because this is about the piece that I was talking about of generosity, of just how we look at other people. And I think this is pretty essential. So this small section from Alan Marinis's Everyday Holiness, again, he writes, one student had an experience around giving something other than money. She and her colleagues at work had been having difficulties and she wasn't getting along with one in particular. Our styles, worldviews, and priorities were quite different, she noticed. With a focus on generosity practice, she said to herself, well, perhaps I can come to the relationship with generosity of spirit, which to me means not having to always be right and to see that I don't have to change her. I will ask myself to be generous enough to give her way of being in the world space to operate. She had the opportunity to put that resolution into action the next morning. I approached her to try to recalibrate our relationship, she said, and I did so with the sole trait of generosity in mind. That intention changed my attitude, and in response, my colleague responded differently to me as well. I believe that entering the conversation with the spirit of generosity made the outcome positive and useful. Gifts given with the express purpose of thawing a frozen heart will in time cause fear to melt away and trust to grow. Each act of generosity works to pry open the heart a little, like clearing a blocked stream 1 pebble at a time. The flow of spontaneity has then free to follow. It may seem strange to practice generosity in order to do work of your own heart. That might even seem somehow to undermine the very quality of generosity itself, since the intention also involves a reward to the giver. Therein lies some of the magic of generosity. It rewards all. In Hebrew, the phrase, and they shall give, benatnu, is spelled vav nun, vav. That's a palindrome, a word that is spelled the same way whether you read it left to right or right to left. Such is the flow of generosity. So I'm going to take this down just to see if there's any questions or reflections or comments on all of this. Everyone's so quiet.
Well, there's a lot to think about.
There is.
There is a lot to think about. And I'm sure we can all apply it to whatever is going on with relationships in our lives.
That's the beauty of Torah right there. We take a text about animal sacrifices and realize just how relevant it truly is.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Ezra.
So if you think about if you give, then maybe someone else will help you out.
Yeah, there's a relationship thing again, right? We help one another by giving. Beautiful.
But I like the concept of giving of the heart without expectations.
Yeah, we don't give in order to receive, but we know that if all of us give, we're all richer because of it.
Yeah.
One of the places that I lived in used to talk about what goes around comes around. What you put out there with no expectation that if there's going to be something right away, but it does tend to increase the good in the world. And eventually that comes back to you or doesn't, but that's not your reason for doing it. But sometimes you'll notice, oh yeah, I remember I remember when I lost my job and I was in rabbinic school and I went to, it happened to be a Friday, I went to the synagogue and I was devastated. And somebody gave me a big chunk of money. I'm talking about they reached into what they had and literally gave it to me. And I keep remembering that there have been several times when people that I was going to school with, when I did have enough money to fill in a blank of something that they needed for their lives, you know, for their food, for their next step, for the whatever it is. And as I think about it now, the way that I look at it is that it's like paying it forward. We also talk about that a lot. Paying it forward has been something that is like, I needed, and I was so fortunate. And so when I have a chance, and I always tell people, they always say, oh, I want to pay you back. I say, no. Someday someone's going to be around you who needs something, and you will be able to give.
Pay it forward. Beautiful.
I love when I find change on the ground, a penny, whatever. I always pick it up, and I always think that this is free charity from God to me that I should now turn around and give double to somebody else. And I in that moment of always picking up the penny or nickel or whatever, I always think now I have to give double back to charity. And I love that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. There's so many ways for us to bring generosity into this world. And I could feel in our Torah study the generosity of everyone's hearts. And I'm just really grateful for everything that you've offered today, your insights, your presence. And I look forward to continuing studying this book with all of you next week as we move to Parashat Tzav. There's a really interesting commentary in there, as there always seems to be, right, on Tzav. And one thing I am going to quickly let you know about, though, is that there will be 1 week that I am not here, which is on March 31st. So it's in 3 weeks from now. So if anyone has an interest in leading Torah study, let me know. I'm not putting any pressure out there. Just letting you know, we could cancel it that 1 week. Someone else can lead it, whatever you want. But you have 3 weeks to kind of think about it and see. I'm going to be helping to run a rabbinic conference out of town, so I just won't be here that one day. Okay, well, great. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to studying with you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Thank you.